The great hall of the Vraxis Concordat did not sit upon the ground. It was carved directly into the tectonic spine of a dying world, a cavernous wound in the planet's crust where the magma bled violet and the air tasted of sulfur and crushed iron. Here, gravity was not a suggestion but a tyrant, pulling at the bones of the mighty, demanding a toll of energy simply to draw breath. This was the seat of the Death World Alliance, a coalition of species forged in the crucibles of high-gravity hellscapes, radioactive wastelands, and predatory ecosystems where sleep was a risk and weakness was a capital sentence. They were the survivors of the galaxy, the hardened chitin, the dense muscle, the minds sharpened by the perpetual threat of extinction. And today, they waited in a silence that felt heavier than the mountain above them, a silence that vibrated with a mixture of contempt and uneasy curiosity. They waited for the humans. High General Krukthar of the Obsidian Carapace shifted his immense bulk, the sound of his armor plates grinding together echoing like stone crushing stone. He was a creature of war, a towering biological tank whose species, the Gorgonites, had evolved on a world where the wind speeds could strip flesh from bone. He looked down from the high obsidian dais, his compound eyes flickering with irritation as he scanned the assembled council. To his left sat Matriarch Zelona of the Arachnid Hive, her limbs folded with predatory grace, her mandibles clicking in a rhythm that betrayed her impatience. To his right was the floating, ethereal form of Counselor Virin, a being of pure energy containment from the neutron star orbiters, whose silence was usually a sign of deep calculation. They were the apex, the unkillable, the conquerors of nature. And yet they had paused their eternal conquest to entertain a species that hailed from a world so temperate, so water-rich, and so pitifully forgiving that the Alliance had classified it as a Garden Level 1. "They are late," Krukthar rumbled, his voice a subsonic tremor that rattled the teeth of the lesser attendants near the chamber doors. "The soft skins lack the discipline of time. It is exactly as the tactical projections predicted. A species that evolves without the constant threat of immediate death has no concept of urgency. Why the High Council agreed to this diplomatic farce is beyond my strategic comprehension. They bring a gift. What gift could a garden world possibly offer the Death World Alliance? Fruit, water, or perhaps the knowledge of how to die quietly?" Matriarch Zelona's voice was a dry rasp, like dry leaves skittering over a grave. "Do not be so quick to dismiss the anomaly, General. Our sensors have been watching their expansion. They do not conquer like us. They do not shatter worlds to extract resources. They integrate. They spread like a moss, slow and covering. Softness can be a form of insulation, but I agree. Their biological density is laughable. Their skeletal structures are porous. If I were to step on one, I would not even feel the crunch. Yet they insisted on this rendezvous. They claim the gift they bring is vital for our future. The audacity of the weak instructing the strong is amusing, if nothing else." "It is not amusement I feel," Virin pulsed, their containment suit glowing with a shifting blue hue. "It is disturbance. The sensors in the outer rim have detected their vessel. It is not moving via conventional hyperlanes. It is displacing space-time in a way that suggests biological manipulation. It does not fly, it swims through the vacuum. And there is a signal, a frequency. It is not a hail. It is not a code. The fleet commanders are reporting distinct psychological distress among the sensor crews. The ship is vocalizing." Krukthar slammed a fist onto the stone table, cracking the basalt. "Vocalizing? A ship does not speak unless it is malfunctioning or broadcasting propaganda. If they are broadcasting, jam it. I will not have my war room filled with the weeping of soft skins." "It is not propaganda," Virin replied, the light in their suit dimming to a cautious gray. "It is a scream, a continuous resonant scream that spans the electromagnetic spectrum. It is getting louder." The massive blast doors of the chamber, thick enough to withstand a tactical nuclear impact, groaned as the atmosphere recyclers struggled to compensate for a sudden pressure drop. The holographic display in the center of the room flickered to life, showing the orbital feed. The gathered warlords and matriarchs leaned forward, their instincts, honed by thousands of years of survival against impossible odds, suddenly screaming at them that something was wrong. They expected a sleek metallic cruiser, perhaps white and pristine, typical of the naive garden worlders who valued aesthetics over armor. They expected clean lines, glass, and symmetry. What appeared on the hololith made Matriarch Zelona recoil, her legs scrambling for perk. Haste on the stone floor. The human ship was an abomination of scale and flesh. It was colossal, eclipsing the flagship of the Gorgonite Armada, a sprawling, asymmetric mass of dark, pulsating matter that looked less like a vessel and more like a severed organ of a galactic titan. It was covered in thick, rope-like veins that glowed with a sickly amber luminescence. There were no engines, only massive, trailing tendrils that twitched and lashed at the void, pulling the monstrosity forward. The hull, if it could be called that, was scarred and pitted, not with blast marks but with calluses, as if the ship had grown layers of skin to heal from cosmic radiation. And from this behemoth, the sensors visualized the sound Viren had warned of. It was a wave of chaotic red spikes on the graph, a discordant, high-pitched shrieking that bled through the station's communication arrays even though the audio was muted. By the void, Krukthar whispered, a sensation he had not felt in centuries creeping up his spine. Fear? No, confusion, deep, primal confusion. That is not a ship, that is a beast. They sent a void beast to our doorstep. Battle stations, raise the planetary defense grid. If that thing breaches the atmosphere, the biocontaminants alone could wipe out the ecosystem. Wait, Viren commanded, their voice cutting through the rising panic. Look at the energy readings. It has no weapons ports, no shielding emitters. The energy signature is metabolic. It is generating heat like a living body. And the scream, listen closely, it is not aggression, it is exertion. The comms officer, a younger Gorgonite whose carapace had not yet fully blackened, looked up from his console, his hands trembling. Hi, General, they are hailing us, but the transmission is embedded in the scream. The audio filters are trying to separate the voice from the noise. It sounds like the ship is in pain, sir, constant, agonizing pain. Put it through, Krukthar snarled, regaining his composure. Let us hear what the monsters have to say. The room filled with a sound that clawed at the psyche. It was a wet, tearing noise, a background roar of biological machinery grinding against itself, a billion cells dying and being reborn in a singular instant. Overlaid on this horrifying cacophony was a voice, calm, synthetic, yet undeniably human. This is the USC Prometheus Unbound. We request permission to dock at the High Spire. We bring the gift, please. Disregard the vocalizations of the vessel. She is singing. It is how she navigates. We mean no harm, but we require high-density docking clamps. She is heavy. She, Zalona hissed. They personify their bioweapon. Typical madness. Grant the permission, General. If we destroy it in orbit, the debris might infect the planet. Bring it down where we can aim the magma cannons directly at its throat. The docking process took 3 standard hours, a tense ordeal where the entire station shuddered as the massive, fleshy vessel coupled with the metallic spire. The grinding of the docking clamps sounded like the station was being eaten. When the airlock cycle finally turned green, a squad of Gorgonite Praetorians, armed with plasma lances and void shields, formed a phalanx around the entrance. Krukthar stood at the front, his hand resting on the hilt of his vibro blade. He expected warriors. He expected genetically modified super-soldiers, hulking monstrosities to match their ship. The airlock hissed open, releasing a cloud of steam that smelled of ozone and rain. It was a scent so alien to the sulfur-choked world of Vraxis that several guards flinched. Out of the mist walked 3 figures. They were small, painfully small. They wore simple, streamlined environmental suits of a matte gray material, their helmets retracted to reveal pale, soft faces. No armor, no weapons. The leader was a woman of advanced years, her hair the color of steel wool, her face lined with the passage of time. She walked with a cane, not of necessity, but of dignity. Behind her walked 2 younger humans, carrying a heavy, sealed container between them. The lead human stopped 10 paces from the wall of armored giants. She looked up at Krukthar, craning her neck to meet his gaze. She did not flinch. She did not tremble. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and terrifyingly calm. I am Ambassador Alara Vance, she said, her voice naturally amplified by a small device on her collar. I represent the Terran Coalition. We thank you for receiving us. Krukthar stared at her. He could crush her skull with 2 fingers. The contrast was absurd. You are the human delegation. You are fragile. I can hear your heart beating from here. It is slow, weak. Efficiency is often mistaken for weakness, High General, Vance replied, a small, polite smile touching her lips. And we are not here to arm wrestle. We are here to fulfill the Treaty of the Outer Rim. We promised a contribution to the Alliance, a resource UL. We lack nothing, Krukthar boomed, stepping closer, his shadow engulfing her. We are the masters of the death worlds. We have conquered gravity, poison, and the void. What could you possibly offer us? And why does your ship scream like a dying animal? It disturbs the council. Vance glanced back at the airlock where the faint, rhythmic shuddering of the Prometheus Unbound could still be felt. The ship is not dying, General. It is living, violently. You hear a scream, we hear a symphony. It is the sound of rapid cellular regeneration. The ship is constantly growing, dying, and healing to protect the crew from the vacuum. It takes the pain so we do not have to. It is a philosophy we humans hold dear. Endurance through sacrifice. Sacrifice is a tool of war, Matriarch Zelona interjected, clicking forward. You speak of it like a pet. Enough pleasantries. Open the container, show us this gift. If it is insufficient, you will be ejected from the airlock and your screaming ship will be incinerated. Vance nodded to her aides. They set the container down. It was made of a material that absorbed the light, heavy and cold. With a sequence of mechanical locks, the lid hissed open. Inside, there was no weapon. There was no gold or energy core. There was a block of transparent, amber-like gel, and suspended within it was a complex, pulsing knot of biological matter, roots, nerves, and muscle fibers interwoven in a geometry that hurt the eyes to look at. This, Vance said softly, is a Genesis node. The council stared in silence. Finally, Krukthar let out a bark of laughter. A plant! You brought us a potted plant, you mocked the Alliance. It is not a plant, Vance said, her voice dropping an octave, losing its diplomatic warmth and becoming cold, hard iron. It is a terraforming engine, but not the mechanical kind you use which takes centuries to scrub the air. This is a biological algorithm. You drop this onto a dead world, a rock with no atmosphere, no water, nothing, and it eats the silence. It breaks down the bedrock, releases oxygen, synthesizes water from mineral hydrates. It grows an ecosystem in a matter of months. It is aggressive. It is invasive. It is the most dangerous thing we have ever created. You claim this, lump, can revitalize a death world? Viren asked, floating closer, their sensors analyzing the object. The energy density is immense, but why give it to us? If you can create worlds, why do you need the Alliance? Vance looked at Viren, then at Krukthar, and finally at the gathered warlords. Her expression shifted. The politeness evaporated, replaced by a weary, ancient sorrow. Because we are leaving, she said. The statement hung in the air like a physical weight. Leaving, Krukthar frowned. Leaving the Alliance you just joined. No, Vance said. We are leaving the galaxy, or at least this arm of it. We are retreating. A murmur of confusion and derision swept through the hall. Retreating? Zelona hissed. Cowardice, typical garden world cowardice. You flee before you have even bled. We are not fleeing from war, Vance said, her voice rising, cutting through the murmurs. We are fleeing from what is coming, and we are giving you the Genesis node not as a tribute, but as a fortification. You call yourselves the Death Worlders. You pride yourselves on survival. You believe that because you evolved in the fire, you own the fire, but you have never seen the dark that eats the fire. Krukthar felt a chill. The human's heart rate had not increased. She was speaking the truth, or at least what she believed to be the truth. Explain yourself, human. What threat drives you from your homes? The Alliance fears nothing. You should, Vance whispered. We call them the Silencers. Our deep-range explorers found them in the Perseus arm. They are not biological. They are not mechanical. They are entropic. They don't attack. They cease. Where they pass, fusion stops. Stars go out. Biology unravels. They are the heat death of the universe given form, and they are attracted to high-energy civilizations. She gestured to the Genesis node. This node is a weapon, General, but not one that shoots. It creates life so rapidly, so violently, that it acts as a flare, a distraction. We are giving you the means to create decoy worlds, baits, to lure the Silencers away from your populated systems. We are giving you the technology to create life so you can feed it to the darkness to save yourselves. The silence in the hall was absolute. The arrogance of the Death Worlders had been punctured by a concept so alien, so horrific, that they could not immediately process it. Feeding worlds to a cosmic predator. You abandon us, Krukthar rumbled, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. You drop a piece of meat at our feet and run, hoping the beast eats us instead of you. No, Vance said, stepping forward, her small hand reaching out to touch the general's armored forearm. He was so shocked by the contact he didn't pull away. We are not running away to hide. We are running to the galactic core to build a trap. But we need time. We need the Death Worlders to be the shield. You are the strongest. You are the hardest to kill. We researched you. We studied your history. You survived meteor strikes, plagues, nuclear winters. If anyone can hold the line against the Silencers, it is you. But you need resources. You need to replenish your worlds faster than they can be extinguished. The Genesis node is your supply line. "And if we refuse?" Zalona asked. "If we execute you and take your ship?" "Then you die," Vance said simply, "and the Prometheus, she will scream." As if on cue, a tremor ran through the station. The screaming from the ship intensified, vibrating the very stones of the hall. It was no longer just a sound, it was a physical pressure. "She knows," Vance said, looking up at the ceiling. "She senses the void. The silencers are not far behind us. We led them here to the strongest fortress in the sector because we believed you were the only ones who wouldn't break." Krukthar looked at the small human. He saw the scars on her face now, the way she stood with the weight of extinction on her shoulders. He realized then that the humans were not garden worlders. They were something else. They were architects of survival. They didn't endure the storm, they engineered the shelter. "This threat," Krukthar said, his voice low. "How long do we have?" "Days," Vance replied. "Maybe hours, the scream of the ship. It's an early warning system. When the scream stops, that means the silence has arrived." Suddenly, the screaming stopped. The abrupt silence was more deafening than the noise. The vibrations ceased. The air went still. Every sensor in the room flatlined. "They are here," Vance whispered. The hololith shifted. The orbital feed showed the stars above Vraxis. One by one, they were blinking out. A shadow was moving across the sky, not a ship, but a patch of nothingness, an absence of light and data. It washed over the sensor buoys, and they simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, just gone. "Battle stations," Krukthar roared, the paralysis breaking. "Launch the fleet, all batteries, fire at will at the void." "No," Vance shouted, her voice commanding. "Energy weapons feed them. You cannot shoot entropy with plasma. Use the kinetic drivers, use solid matter, and deploy the node." "Deploy it where?" Zalona shrieked, panic finally cracking her chitinous demeanor. "Here," Vance pointed to the floor. "Into the planet's mantle. You need to overcharge the planet's biosphere. Make it burn so bright with life that it blinds them. We have to turn Vraxis into a supernova of biology." Krukthar hesitated only for a microsecond. The logic was insane, alien, and terrifying, but it was a plan. "Engineers, drill usage authorization Alpha 1, breach the crust in the central chamber. Do it now." The floor of the Great Hall retracted, revealing the magma vent that heated the station. The heat blasted upward, singing the eyebrows of the humans, but they didn't flinch. The two aides grabbed the Genesis node. "Throw it in," Vance ordered. They tossed the container into the magma. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the planet screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a sensation. The Genesis node dissolved, releasing the terraforming algorithm directly into the planetary bloodstream. The magma turned from violet to a blinding, verdant green. Vines of energy erupted from the vents, shooting up through the station, punching through the obsidian roof, and lashing out into the atmosphere. On the surface, the barren, sulfurous rocks began to crack. Forests of impossible, crystalline trees erupted from the ground in seconds, growing kilometers high, piercing the smog clouds. The atmosphere thickened, the oxygen levels spiking to toxic concentrations for the non-adapted, but energizing the Death Worlders. The shadow in the sky recoiled. The silencers, drawn to the sudden, explosive bloom of chaotic life energy, slowed. The nothingness swirled, confused by the sheer volume of existence radiating from the planet. "The Prometheus," Vance yelled over the roaring wind of rapid growth. "She is the conductor, she needs to direct the flow." On the screen, the massive bioship detached from the spire. It didn't flee. It turned its nose, that scarred, fleshy prow, toward the encroaching darkness, and it screamed again. But this time, the scream was amplified by the planetary energy. It was a weaponized song of life, a frequency of pure biological assertion that hit the silencers like a physical wall. The void rippled. The entropy field began to destabilize. The silencers were being force-fed more data, more life, more chaos than they could delete. "Now, General," Vance grabbed Krukthar's arm. "While they are stunned, your kinetic fleets ram them, shatter their cohesion." Krukthar grinned, a terrifying bearing. Of Fangs, this he understood. All ships, ramming speed, target the anomalies for Vraxis, for the Alliance. The Gorgonite fleet, heavy, armored, and unaerodynamic, launched themselves like bullets. They didn't fire lasers. They accelerated to fractions of light speed and slammed their massive, dense hulls into the shadow. The impact was silent in the void, but the sensors registered a shockwave of shattered reality. The silencers, brittle in their complex physics, shattered under the brute force of matter. The void broke apart into harmless cosmic dust. The stars flickered back into view. On the surface of Vraxis, the rapid growth slowed. The planet was transformed. The grim, volcanic rock was now covered in a jungle of bioluminescent flora, a testament to the aggressive life the humans had unleashed. In the Great Hall, the silence returned, but it was different now. It was the silence of exhaustion, of survival. Krukthar looked at the hololith, then down at the small woman standing amidst the chaos of overgrown vines that now draped the council chamber. The Prometheus Unbound drifted in orbit, its scream reduced to a low, satisfied purr. "You," Krukthar rumbled, dropping to one knee, bringing his eye level with hers. "You used my planet as a grenade. You turned our home into a weapon of life." "It was the only way," Vance said, her breathing heavy now, the adrenaline fading. "Death cannot fight death. Only life can fight death. You are the Death Worlders because you survive, but survival is not enough. You must thrive. That is the human gift. We don't just survive the environment, we change it. We overwhelm it." Matriarch Zelona approached, touching one of the new, glowing leaves that had sprouted from the stone table. "It is beautiful and terrifying. It is a jungle that eats stone." "It will stabilize," Vance said. "In a few weeks, Vraxis will be a paradise. A dangerous one, but a paradise. You will have more resources than you know what to do with." "And the silencers?" Viren asked. "That was a scout force," Vance admitted. "The main body is still coming, but now you know how to fight them. You don't hide, you don't conserve, you grow. You scream your existence so loud they cannot silence you." Krukthar stood up, towering over the delegation. He looked at the other council members. The fear was gone, replaced by a new understanding. The humans were not weak. They were dangerous in a way the Alliance had never conceived. They weaponized evolution itself. "The Alliance acknowledges the debt," Krukthar said formally. "And we accept the gift. But you said you were going to the core to build a trap. You will need fleets to guard your backs while you build." Vance smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "We would appreciate the escort, General." "The Gorgonite Armada will accompany you," Krukthar declared. "Let the galaxy see, the Death Worlders and the Life Shapers. We will scream into the dark together." The scene dissolved into the slow, rhythmic work of diplomacy and logistics, but the atmosphere had shifted irrevocably. The humans, once seen as soft, were now viewed with a wary awe. They carried the seeds of gods in their pockets and piloted ships that sang of agony and birth. Weeks later, as the combined fleets prepared to jump toward the galactic core, Krukthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Prometheus Unbound take point. The human ship's vanes glowed bright against the starlight. "General," his comms officer said, "the human ship is hailing us. They wish to synchronize the jump drive." "Granted," Krukthar said. "They also sent a message, sir, a text packet. Thank you for listening." Krukthar grunted. He listened to the faint background hum of the human ship over the comms. It wasn't a scream anymore, it sounded like a heartbeat. Strong, steady, unstoppable. "Open a channel to the fleet," Krukthar ordered. "Tell them to follow the song. We march into the fire." The fleet jumped, leaving streaks of light in the void, a spear of unity thrown into the heart of the coming darkness. The Death World Alliance had changed. They were no longer just survivors of the hostile dark. They were the guardians of the aggressive light, and at the helm was the fragile, terrifying species that had taught them the most important lesson of all, that in a universe of cold silence, the most powerful weapon is the refusal to be quiet. The story of the living gift was far from over. It was merely the opening note of a war that would shake the pillars of creation. But for the first time in eons, the Death Worlders did not fear the end, for they carried the seeds of the beginning. The camera pulled back, away from the fleet, away from the transformed green jewel of Vraxis, drifting into the deep silence of the intergalactic void. There in the crushing dark, something ancient and cold stirred, agitated by the sudden flare of life. It turned its gaze toward the galaxy, hungry. But this time, the galaxy stared back, and it was screaming. End of transcript. The archives of the Vraxis Concordat would later describe the event not as the human arrival, but as the day of the green fire. The cultural impact was immediate and chaotic. The logic of the Death Worlders had always been binary, kill or be killed. The humans introduced a third variable, chain. In the mess halls of the Gorgonite warships, soldiers polished their armor while debating the nature of the human bioarcs. Rumors spread that the humans didn't build ships but birthed them in massive stellar nurseries. They whispered that the human ambassador, Vance, was not merely an elder but a gardener, a title that the translation matrices struggled to interpret. Was it a military rank? A religious icon? To understand the depth of this shift, one must look at the private journals of Counselor Virin. As a being of energy, Virin perceived the universe through resonance. In their logs, dated 2 cycles after the departure, Virin wrote, "The human frequency is discordant. We seek harmony, stability, the stillness of the rock. They seek disruption. Their biology is a constant war against entropy. They die so easily, yet they replace themselves with such ferocity. Their living gift was not just a terraforming engine, it was a philosophy made manifest. It taught us that stagnation is death. To survive the silencers, we must become like the humans, unstable, rapid, and overwhelmingly loud. I fear them. I admire them. I pity the darkness that tries to consume them." Meanwhile, on the USC Prometheus Unbound, the atmosphere was different. The crew, numbering in the thousands, moved through the vascular corridors of their ship with the ease of people living inside a whale. The walls pulsed with warmth. The air was rich with oxygen and the scent of chlorophyll. Ambassador Vance sat in her quarters, looking out at the stars through a membrane window that twitched occasionally. She held a datapad, reviewing the tactical assessments of the Gorgonite fleet. They were strong, brittle but strong. They would be the hammer. Humanity would be the hand that swings it. "Ambassador," the ship's voice spoke, resonating from the walls. The ship's AI, integrated into the biological neural network, had a voice like wind through trees. "My stress levels are stabilizing. The resonance with the Vraxis planetary core was invigorating." "You did well, Prometheus," Vance said, stroking the wall, feeling the thrum of the ship's circulation. "Did we scare them?" "Heart rate analysis suggests the Gorgonites experienced a 400% spike in terror during the screaming phase," the ship replied. "However, their endorphin levels are now elevated. They are excited. They interpret my vocalizations as a war cry." Vance chuckled a dry sound. "Let them think that. Better a war cry than a birth pang. They don't need to know that you were just stretching your legs." The fleet dropped out of warp on the edge of the galactic core. Here, the stars were so dense they formed a blinding wall of light. The gravity wells were treacherous, a labyrinth of black holes and neutron stars. This was the construction site. Waiting for them were the remnants of the other fleets, species the humans had gathered along their journey. The aquatic Hydari, the silicon-based lithivores, the gaseous nebulas of the ether. It was a ragtag armada of the desperate and the weird. When the massive Gorgonite ships decelerated, their obsidian hulls casting long shadows against the starlight, a ripple of uneasiness went through the gathered coalition. The Death Worlders had a reputation. They were the bullies of the Outer Rim. But then the Prometheus moved to the center, flanked by Kruk'Thar's flagship, the World Breaker. Kruk'Thar opened a system-wide channel. His face appeared on the screens of 1,000 different species. "This is High General Kruk'Thar of the Vraxis Concordat," he boomed. "We stand with the humans, we stand with the living ships, we are the shield, you are the architects. Let us build this trap and kill the dark." The cheers that erupted across the fleet were a mix of clicks, roars, and digital bursts. It was the sound of a galaxy uniting not out of love, but out of a shared refusal to go quietly into the night. The trap they were building was a Dyson swarm, but not of mirrors. It was a swarm of Genesis nodes. They were going to seed the accretion disk of the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy with life. They were going to create a beacon of biological energy so bright that the silencers would swarm it like moths to a flame. And when they were all gathered, caught in the gravity well, the humans would detonate the star. It was a plan of madness, a plan of suicide, a plan that only a species from a garden world who understood the cycle of life and death could conceive. And it was a plan that only the Death Worlders who laughed at the impossible could execute. Vance watched the construction begin. Giant biopods were launched into the swirling plasma of the accretion disk. The Prometheus sang to them, guiding their growth. The scream was now a melody, complex and haunting, weaving through the radiation storms. "It begins," she whispered. Deep in the void, the silencers turned. They felt the trap. They did not understand it, but they hungered for it. They began to move, a tide of nothingness washing over the stars, heading for the core. The war for existence had begun, and the galaxy, for the first time, was not silent. It was roaring with the defiant, chaotic, beautiful noise of life. The end. Epilogue, the archives of the future. Millennia later, after the Great Silence had been broken and the galaxy receded, the descendants of the Alliance would visit the memorial on Vraxis Prime. The planet was still a jungle, the trees now reaching the edge of space. In the center of the old capital, a statue stood. It was not of a warrior nor of a king. It was a statue of a human and a Gorgonite standing back to back. The Gorgonite held a sword, the human held a seed. The inscription at the base was written in the high tongue of the Union, a blend of human syntax and Gorgonite growls. Here the soft taught the hard to bend, here the quiet taught the loud to sing. Here we planted the future in the corpse of the past. And if one listened closely, pressing their ear to the base of the statue, they could still hear it. A faint, rhythmic vibration deep in the ground, the heartbeat of the planet. The echo of the scream. The living gift endured.